Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the No Nonsense Roundtable. I'm Dom Genova, your host, every Saturday right here on News Radio Wham 1180, and all the past shows are on NoNonsenseRoundtable.com. And the show is people you know and people that you want to know about, and I have somebody today who fits both those categories. I would say he's somebody that if you are our age, my age, you would know him because he was a very popular disc jockey in the early 60s. And if you are a younger age, you need to know him because he not only was a talent back then, was a talent for 20 years as a disc jockey, right, Jack?
Right.
And from there pivoted to being an entrepreneur of a very large company, and it's a fascinating story. So it works on both different ways, and I have the honor of having Jack Palvino here with me today. Jack, thank you for being here. I mean, you're the professional of professionals. I am humbled to be able to be here with you.
Well, I'm honored. I thank you very much for having me here, Dom. Most people have forgotten me.
well, you know, when they do that, when you're in your 20s, you have a problem. At your age, you know, you get the benefit of the doubt here. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, in particular, it's a very entertaining story, and it's a very, very important thing for people to know about what life was like in entertainment and radio going back years ago. You know, we talk these days about people that are on the internet, influencers, people that the young kids look up to. And back then it was, you know, it's almost like, I think it was like the Camelot days of radio, where the disc jockey was more than just somebody who spun records and just gave you the time and temperatures. You know, certainly there were those guys, but there were those guys that you gravitated to, you listened to, and even the music back then. You had, you know, protest music and whatever, and you know, I'd like you to explain that to people. Let's relive a little bit of that from the day.
Oh, that's fun. I'm 12 years younger than WHAM. So when I started in radio in 1958, and I lasted until 1998, you have to understand there was no Wi-Fi. There were no iPhones. There were no TV stations. Rochester had 2, and they went off at midnight after playing the national anthem. Radio and newspapers were king. I'm blessed to have been able to be in broadcasting starting in 1958. We were kings. We could go down to Don Sunoco on Monroe Avenue, never had to pay for gas. We would go to the Powers Hotel. Come on in, Jack, lunch on us. We were kings. TV was not even with us. I think Don Elhart was in diapers at the time.
I think people don't see the similarity, or they don't know the similarities between then and now. I mean, now you have these influencers, you have people that are popular on TV, and they get all this press and whatever. Back then, it was your local, you know, fella or gal on the radio.
Radio was it. That's what you listened to for all the news. The newspaper was what you read for all the other news. Whereas now there's so many platforms with all the Wi-Fis and everything else, all the computers that people have, it has become splintered over the years, unfortunately. And radio was king when I was young, and we absolutely loved it.
Well, back then, you had 3 TV stations, even if you had the 3 TV stations, and they signed off it. Well, I mean, Johnny Carson would be on, and then you would have this test pattern, and for some reason there was an Indian in the middle of the test pattern.
Yeah.
I can never, you remember that, right?
Yeah, I do remember that.
I don't know why they did that, but it was totally different back then. But communication was, the big tech was having a 10 transistor radio.
Yeah, that's right. Transistor radios were the newest fad, and they caught on like crazy. I could remember way back when, in the early days of radio, I have been really honored to be with Rochester's top 3 historical stations, WBBF, WBOR, and of course WHAM. And when we started, BBF stands for Bernard B. Foreman. It was owned by Maury Foreman, who owned Foreman's Clothing, of course, and co-founded Midtown Plaza with Gil McCurdy.
Ah.
And so our studios, of course, were in the first in Midtown Plaza, where I worked for 40 years. And it's still a shock to me as I drive by and see my place gone. This was an amazing growth series in Rochester with these 3 stations. In 1960, WBBF was the #1 radio station, not only in Rochester, but in the country. Think about that. A lousy little 1,000-watt station that you couldn't hear on a windy day in Canandaigua. And here was the top station. And the top announcer, I was blessed to be able to work with, all late, I'm afraid to say, but Jerry Fogel, Joe Dean, and the most popular disc jockey ever in the history of Rochester radio, Nick Nixon. At one time, 90% of the people listening to all of radio stations listened to Nick. He had a 1-hour period sold to Hallman Chevrolet. By the time 20 minutes had elapsed, Nick had sold at least 1 car every day on the radio. And they would call him and say, "Nick, yank it off."
Well, and what is the competitive advantage that you have? It sounds like it's personality and humor and entertainment. I mean,
personality, and that's one of the factors that I dislike most about the current situation of the radio market is the lack of true personalities. People who really went their own way and had fun. I had fun. I never worked a day in my life. Mm-hmm. A lot of my bosses told me they agree with me, but still, I loved going to work every morning. It wasn't work. This was play.
Well, tell me. I wasn't here at the time. I was down in New York City, and my guy was Imus in the morning, and
right.
he kind of bonded with the guy, and he was a little. Of course, he was crazy.
He was crazy.
But tell me about your particular view of things. So here in Rochester. Now, I heard that you were very entertaining with your producer, right?
Well, my producer was the late, great Don Ariano, an engineer with a great sense of humor. And he spoke to me like a ventriloquist through voices that he had lifted off CDs and albums. And we could carry on a total conversation without him moving his lips, and we could go on for 10, 15 minutes. I would never know what was going to hit me when I got to work in the morning at 6 o'clock, but it kept me on my toes. I remember one morning opened up and said, with Don Rickles' voice, "Oh, wow. Here's the idiot again for another day." And I had to be ready to come back with it. BBF was so popular. The beauty of radio is that it is the theater of the mind. Uh-huh. It creates mental pictures that you cannot create, even in TV.
Yep.
Because the mind is such a wonderful painter. Mm-hmm. On April Fool's Day of 1960, we introduced on my morning show electroodoronics. And we said, through some friends in Canada, we had imported a new technology so that not only will you be able to hear radio, but starting at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning on my show, you'll be able to smell it. Now, we've called the Rochester Fire Department, and the Rochester Fire Department has assured us that they'll have engines standing by in case of a malfunction. We've called the police department. They are on standby in case of an insurrection. But if you'll stay with us, we'll try to get through this together. So I started the countdown at 6:30 a.m., 10, 9, 8, 7. Finally, we got to 7 o'clock. And all of a sudden, you hear the sound of a coffee pot percolating. Uh-huh. And now I said, all of you listening, Henrietta, Grease, Hilton, if you would tell me when you smell the coffee. Well, we had a lady who listened every day. Her name was Mrs. Lavecchi, nice Italian lady. She says, Jack, I'm hear that. I smell it too. And I'm in Henrietta. Another one called from Hilton. Jack, this is Louise. I don't smell a damn thing. I said, Louise, you know where you are in Hilton is right behind the Chase Tower. It's got to go right around that tower before it gets to you. Call me back when you smell it. Sure enough, an hour she called back, Jack, I smell it. This is what radio can do. And we did it. And for an hour and a half, we had Rochester going. And then we said, finally, April Fool. Yeah. That is the
what
beauty.
A great story.
It's the beauty of radio.
War of the Worlds with smell. Well, we have to take a break right now, and we will be back right after this. Well, welcome back to the No Nonsense Roundtable. We're talking today with Jack Palvino, and I would call you the Dean of Rochester Broadcasting. Well, it actually goes beyond that. We're going to be talking about the group that you owned for quite a while. But one of the things I like to ask people in your line of work is that you must have come across some very interesting characters in your day.
Yes, I have and did. The three presidents I met were President Carter and President Nixon and President Reagan, who was stiff as a Marine colonel.
Really?
As he spoke at the War Memorial, and I was seated right behind the president. And he referred to our hockey team, instead of the Rochester Amerks, as the Rochester Mercs. So I leaned up to try to say, Mr. President, it's pronounced Amerks. As I tried to lean forward, I noticed over my left shoulder a gun barrel from the Secret Service gentleman who was seated behind me at the time. After that, I didn't move.
He can pronounce it any way he damn well
Say
pleases.
whatever you want to say. And President Carter, when he visited, he being a graduate of the Naval Academy and a bright man, engineer, he was more interested in my engineer, Don Ariano's dials in the control room, than he was with anything else on the radio station. And I asked him, can I play a record for you? He said, oh, yeah, play me a song, would you? I said, what would you like to hear, Mr. President? It Traveling Man, the Allman Brothers, My Neighbors.
Really?
Yes, and I played it for him. Couldn't say no, he was the president.
No, I would have expected he would have wanted something country rather than the Allman. I love the Allman Brothers.
Well, sure. Yes, absolutely right. Yeah, and President Bush had a local fundraiser, won a toaster, courtesy of Chase Bank at the time. And I said, congratulations to you, Mr. President. He said, well, wasn't this worth the trip to Rochester? So I have some wonderful private moments with presidents, indeed.
And you have a Ray Charles story, right?
Oh, yes, many of them. I was emceeing at the Auditorium Theater, and just before we were about to go on, Ray said, Mr. Jack, would you ask my manager to, he called me Mr. Jack, would you ask my manager to leave the room, please? So I did, and he left. He said, would you sit next to me and open that little valise at the floor? I said, sure. He said, would you count the money in there for me, please? And I did. He said, is there $5,000 in there? I said, well, it looks like it's close. He said, okay, close enough. Now we can do the show. I didn't realize why he did that until I saw the movie Ray.
Yeah.
His managers had been stealing from him left and right. So whatever city he went to, he would ask the DJ, and Rochester was me, would you please count the money so no one takes it from me?
Yeah.
That was Ray Charles.
Yeah, he trusted you.
More than anybody else. And I only met him 24 hours ago. Yeah. What a talent.
Do you meet somebody whose personality surprised you either for the better or the worst?
Well, quite a few, but one of the cutest was we had a record hop at Charlotte, and Brenda Lee was the star.
Uh-huh.
And so her mother was the chaperone. her mother came over, and I said, how old is Brenda? He said, well, she's 8, 9. She's going to be 9 next. I said, okay, so what kind of fee would you like? She said, Brenda likes what all those people are eating over there. Oh, I said, you mean an Abbott's custard? We all love that.
Oh, yeah.
So Brenda Lee's fee was a custard from Abbott's.
Oh, that's sweet. How old do you say she was?
I think she was 10.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Real youngster.
Yeah, even at that age.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now you got a chance to have people on air quite a bit. Is there a particular story that pops out at you? You know, somebody's life story.
Well, there are a lot of them, but among the people that I was really impressed with were Red Barber.
Oh, I love Red Barber. Yeah,
one of the greatest broadcasters ever, and he came on the show and had just a wonderful discussion about jobs in life, and how if you love your job, you never have to work a day in your life. He said, like what you're doing here. Yeah. I said, I love it. He said, I know. He said, I love mine too. He said, that's the whole key to life.
Yeah.
And that's pretty sound philosophy from a sports guy.
Well, and anybody who doesn't know, Red Barber was the announcer for the play-by-play guy for the Yankees.
Yes, he was.
Living down in New York, you associate the Yankees with either Red Barber and then Phil Rizzuto. Phil Rizzuto were the two guys, and then I forgot what the other guy's name was. Oh, Mel Allen.
Mel Allen.
Mel Allen and
White Owl Wallop.
Oh,
remember the cigars?
No. Oh, yeah.
They call a home run with Mel Allen a White Owl Wallop.
And he probably got paid $1 or $2 for that.
Oh,
right?
I'm sure he did.
That's the thing. That's the way things work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're about ready to head into a break, but after the break, I'm going to ask you about that, about the music and who picks the music and how to show up on your show and stuff like that. But we're going to do that right after this, because this is a hard news break, and we know this is News Radio Wham 1180. Well, welcome back. You're listening to No Nonsense Roundtable. I'm Dom Genova, your host, every Saturday right here on News Radio Wham 1180, and we are here today with Mr. Jack Palvino, who I have branded as the Dean of Rochester Broadcasting. He's saying he's 12 years younger than Wham, and Wham has been around since 1922. So do the math. Do the math. I have a very distinguished gentleman in front of me. And at the bottom of the hour, as everybody knows, I like to give a shout out to the Bob Johnson Auto Group, who sponsors the show and allows me to do what I'm doing, and is a great place to buy a car, buy a truck, or get one fixed. And another part of the No Nonsense Roundtable is that we produce some marketing materials and whatever. And just recently, in last month, we did something for the Rochester Rotary Sunshine Camp, and I'd like you to hear this little musical branding that we did, and it's voiced over by Mr. Don Alhart, somebody everybody knows.
It's a magical place for kids of all abilities.
At no charge, the Rochester Rotary Sunshine Camp has been serving children of all abilities for the last 100 years. Help us grow into the next 100 years. Go to sunshinecamp.org to learn more about how you can help.
Where kids have no barriers to fun.
The Rochester Rotary Sunshine Camp.
So there you go. A wonderful organization, the Rochester Rotary Sunshine Camp. So Jack, let's talk about the day-to-day operation of being like on all the time. Somebody said once to me, I had some training at Chrysler where I used to work for, and they said that Johnny Carson isn't happy all the time. That's the way they word it. You have to put on a face, and you have to get on the air, and you have to be creative and whatever. And what you're doing for a show now, how many hours a day were you on?
I was on 4 hours a day from 6 in the morning till 10.
I mean that's got to be a lot of work and prep and what. I mean, what was your day like?
It was long. I didn't get home till after 6 at night, so 12 hours a day.
Really?
Yeah. Because I did other things. I was program director. We had to pick the music. The music was voted on every afternoon on the Nick Nixon show. And all of these teenagers would man the phones. And every day they would say at 6 o'clock what the top 10 tunes were every day. And the record people would line up. We would receive, you remember records, some of you don't, I'm sure, but we would got 200 records a week in the hope that we would play them. And if they got on Nick's show, they would really be smashes. And so they would absolutely love that. But my normal day would have been a 10 to 12 hour day. And we would prepare for what we were trying to do the next day, not only for the show, but for the station. And some of the promotions were outlandish. Bob Keeve was the manager of BBF. He was the ex-writer for President Eisenhower, a Harvard graduate. And he had us do station breaks featuring Jose Greco doing Morse code taps, spelling out BBF. I said, Bob, who's going to know this? He said, we got to do it. We got to try it. Sure enough, we got a call the next day. That's Morse code from BBF. I said, that's right. He actually got through. That's how outlandish the things we were doing were. And he did things that no one ever thought of doing at that time.
Okay, so let's get really creative here. What was the one thing that you did that was like, wow, that really worked? And then tell me something that didn't work.
The BBF raft race. We sunk more rafts in the Genesee River than anyone ever in history. We had people building rafts on their own and would have prizes from our sponsors as they floated down the river. I built 3 that sank myself. My son, who was a good guy at building sinking docks, also helped in this area. And it was an incredible, and finally the sheriff's department quietly said, guys, cool it with the raft races. Will you please? We're sick of picking people up out of the river in Genesee Park. So we killed the raft race.
The EMS people must have been really livid with you.
They were furious with us.
This sounds like something from WKRP.
Yeah, it's very similar.
With the turkey drop.
Yeah, right. Same thing.
So tell me something that was really successful. You were number 1 in the ratings and whatever. So it had to take some work, right?
Oh, the main thing was the connection with the audience and station editorials, and traffic helicopter, Officer Gare in the air, Gary Chard, and a couple of times in the late Ron DiCerio. So we were the first to have helicopter reports in Rochester, and they were just a smash. Now, later in life, we tried that as we formed a company and purchased a radio station in Buffalo. Bombed. Couldn't care less.
Yeah.
People said, forget it. Traffic, we'll find our own way. In fact, everything we did in Rochester, editorials, we had great commentators like Dick Tobias, the most unforgettable character I've ever met in my life, and a wonderful newsman. He got into a fight with Santa Claus and hit him at our Christmas party after a couple of Manhattans. He was a curmudgeon.
Well, that was before cell phones, so I'm sure you didn't have a recording of that.
No, we don't. No, we don't. But everything we tried in Rochester that worked didn't work in Buffalo.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, they all have their own kind of planetary system,
Yes, absolutely right.
So you went on. I talk about people pivoting. You had a career now. The question I always ask, though, I ask a lot of times, is that what did you want to do when you were very young? I mean, Don Alhart wanted to be in broadcasting since he was very young. Now you kind of pivoted because you went to school for law school for a while.
I did. So I always wanted to be a broadcaster. But at the 40-year mark, I said, there aren't many 48-year-old DJs other than we's around. So I want something that's going to give me a more solidarity. And I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had been reading books, and even at law school, which I didn't care for, I did care for the business of broadcasting.
Yeah.
I said, wow, how does this work?
Yeah.
And I was very happy to meet a gentleman, the late Bud Wertheimer from Syracuse, along with Ed Musicus in Rochester, the best sales manager ever. And we formed the Lincoln Group in 1978. And we took over all of the features from WBBF AM for the first time in the whole country to the FM dial.
Uh-huh.
And within 2 years, we were the number one billing and number one rated station in Rochester. And we knocked off WHAM.
Yeah.
So 2 years later, we got a call. Guys, Mr. Rust would like to talk to you about purchasing WHAM. And so we purchased it in 1985. And here it is, the same station we've just knocked off that we have to now recreate. And it really has been the most favored station in all of our 7 stations. It is like a museum. We have pictures of Babe Ruth at the Wham microphone and Stronger Carlson going all the way through the years to right now where Wham has existed. And in broadcasting, longevity is success.
Well, I have this statement that some organizations, businesses have woven their way into the culture of Rochester. You know, the Red Wings, the Eastman Theater, even Wegmans, and certainly Wham is right up there in the forefront. And we are ready to head into another break, and we're going to talk more about this entrepreneurial spirit that you have when we come back. Well, welcome back. You're listening to No Nonsense Roundtable. We're here with Mr. Jack Palvino, and besides being a fellow that was a disc jockey, entertainer, somebody who managed a studio himself at WHAM and WBBF, you also became quite the entrepreneur. You remind me a lot of another guest that I've had on a couple of times, which is Phil Saunders. And Phil Saunders, of course, everybody knows Phil.
Yes.
He started...
Good man.
Oh, great man. The School of Business at RIT is named after Phil. And that same entrepreneurial spirit where you chart your own course. And it went from your corporate job into owning the stations that you did as Lincoln Group. So let's learn a little bit more about that.
It's really the beauty of this great country of ours that people like me, as the son of a plumber and a Rundequoit, can turn into a broadcast owner and succeed. And I believe that in broadcasting, it's such a difficult and shaky path because you're talking about intangibles, unlike a lot of other businesses, which have a building and have this and have that. We had all kinds of opportunities in 1978 that we thought were incredible. One was the fact that FM radio had been totally ignored. Everybody had an FM, but no one knew what to do with it. And it was on elevators, Muzak, and it was in hard rock stations like CMF. But other than that, people said, what are we going to do with it? So I was having a little breakfast at the Manhattan restaurant on East Avenue, and I love blueberry muffins. And I met a gentleman from Syracuse, Bud Wertheimer, and he said, Jack, why don't we form a company and try to do something with FM? And he said, I'll handle all of the finances, and I'll take care of the engineering. You do the programming and sales. And we're not going to step on each other's toes. And we never did for 20 years. A Dartmouth graduate with a master's and doctorate degree. Brilliant man, absolutely brilliant, and honored to be his partner. He said, why doesn't FM do what AM did? I said, I can't answer that question. There's no reason. We can't have traffic helicopters on FM, a Dick Tobias commentary on FM, live DJs on FM. Let's try it. We had 9 employees. We ranked number 15 in the 13-station Rochester broadcast market. Nobody was listening to WVOR 100.5. Blended music, they called it. We went to solid gold music, gold records that had sold 1 million copies each. That's all we played with live DJs. And then we set up the Heart of Gold Charitable Foundation through my late brother's law firm, Harder, Seacrest and Emery, adjusted all of this so that as we progressed, by adding all these features, we could measure how they were doing. Well, sure enough, in about a year, we were the top station in the whole market. And all of a sudden, people from all over broadcasting. Rochester was approached by the Radio Advertising Bureau, the NAB, National Association. They wanted to write articles on this FM switch with AM features. And so they wrote a couple articles on us for national publications, In Search of Excellence, they called it. We then started spreading out. We purchased WBUF in Buffalo, and as I mentioned, nothing that we tried there worked because we copied Rochester. And then we went to WXK in Salem, Ohio, a little country station. What a wonderful little station that was. Did nothing but sit there and make money for us.
So, I mean, there's a couple of things you said here that kind of stood out with me. Is that you and your partner had different talents.
Yes.
And that's the key to anything. As a key, I think as a key to marriage, as a key to sports club, whatever, is not stepping on each other and realizing what your limitations are. And the other thing is being an entrepreneur, and I would consider myself to be an entrepreneur, is you see something a little bit before somebody else sees it. Because when everybody else sees it,
it's too late.
It's too late. It's too late. You can't buy something that's undervalued when it becomes valued the way it's supposed to be. It's like me with the dealership in Avon. It's one of those. I think that's probably the best qualities that you can have when you're starting a business or you want to be an entrepreneur. Now the Lincoln Group got pretty big, but then you got to the point where you divested yourself of the Lincoln Group, all told, right?
We didn't want to. In 1996, the FCC passed the Telecommunications Act, which allowed radio operators to purchase more than one or two stations in the market. One AM and one FM, that's all it used to be. Now, if the ratings numbers weren't too high to make you a monopoly, stations could buy as many as they wanted to be in the market. We were the first case in front of the FCC in Washington for the Telecommunications Act. As we went before them, 9 gentlemen in blue suits and red ties, and my partner and I with our sweatshirts from Rochester, we walked in and gave about 2 days' worth of evidence. At the end of the 2 days, the chairman of the FCC said, Mr. Withar, would you write for us, please, the way you think that this case should be decided? So Bud, my late partner, said, sure. He wrote it up, mailed it to them. 2 weeks later, we received the verdict that we were allowed to buy more stations, as were other companies, verbatim from what Bud had written. He wrote the whole decision for the Federal Communications Commission. That is what our little company was sitting with in 1997. So when we were approached by a very large company, CBS and others, to be purchased, they frankly made us an offer we couldn't turn down. We didn't want to stop.
Well, I have to tell you, it's been a delight having you here. We're about to end the show, but before we end the show, I have an observation by looking at you and looking in the light of your eyes, and I would tend to think that Mr. Jack Palvino has lived his life the way he has wanted to live his life.
That's the truth.
Pretty much true?
Yes, absolute truth. God's blessed me.
And what would you give to advice to younger people who might be listening to this show?
The same advice I give to our 8 grandchildren and soon to be 3 great-grandchildren.
Oh, God bless you.
If you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life.
Amen. And you being here helped me love what I love to do. So I appreciate you being here. It's been an honor to meet you finally after all this time, spend some time with you. And God bless you for what you've done, what you've accomplished, and who you are.
Thank you.
So next week, 10 to 11, right here on News Radio Wham 1180. And we'll see you then, or you'll hear us then, more accurately. Bye-bye. Well, thanks for watching this YouTube. If you liked it, please like and share.